Welcome to the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang. Today's show is brought to you by Acorns, the Not Old Better Show and Acorns. Acorns makes it easy for everyone to start saving and investing. And I think you're just going to love today's show. It is about the subject of belonging. What does it mean to belong? Is home a place, a language, a history, or something else entirely? Our guest today is Caroline Topperman. She thought she knew. She grew up speaking Polish, knowing her family's deep roots in the country and believing that moving there with her husband would feel like coming home. But instead of familiarity, she found disconnection. Instead of certainty, she found questions. The result of that search is her stunning new book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow, One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. Caroline Topperman's our guest today, and I think you're just going to love this interview. Caroline Topperman's story is not just about her own journey. It's about the generations before her who crossed borders and survived wars, about ancestors who built roads in Afghanistan, fought political battles in Poland, and escaped the horrors of World War II. It's about what gets passed down through family stories and what gets lost in translation. Caroline Topperman has uncovered letters, documents, and even an entire book written by her grandfather, one referenced in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and Stanford's Hoover Institution. But she also found the gaps, the missing voices, the untold truths. And through it all, she wrestled with a question so many of us face. Do we ever truly find home, or do we create it? This is an unforgettable conversation about identity, history, and the invisible ties that connect us to our past. If you've ever wondered how much your family story shapes who you are, today, this episode is for you. All of us who are so interested in genealogy and ancestry, all of us that use these resources, this is going to be the episode for you. So let's welcome to the Not Old Better Show writer, entrepreneur, and world traveler, Caroline Topperman. Caroline Topperman, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
It is great to talk to you, too. We're going to talk about your new book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow, One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. The title just jumped right out at me. I know our audience is going to be excited about this subject, so I really just kind of want to jump right in and talk about your journey, because it's very personal. This was a deeply personal book, and but it's also a historical book too, and it's really fascinating to me when that kind of comes together. What was the moment that made you realize that I just have to write this book?
I had a few moments because the first time I started collecting these stories was back in 1995. I've just aged myself. Right after my mother passed away, and my dad and I would start taking walks, and he'd just start telling me about the family because there was so much we didn't know. My grandparents didn't talk about their time during the war or anything like that. So there were just these holes. But I know I wasn't mature enough at the time to really dive into this and really explore this. And so the second time was when I moved to Poland in 2013, and the government was on the brink of a change, and there were some ugly headlines starting to appear in newspapers. And I thought, okay, no, I need to write a book. And I found their stories very fascinating. And then the third time, and this is all the same book, was that I had started pitching this book. It was a very different version. And I was getting responses from agents and some publishers, and they were sort of telling me that my family story was more interesting than some of the other things I included. And so 2019, I think, was like the whole rewrite to what it is now. Um, but there was a time when, just to bring up politics, I guess, I don't know, I can't get away from that with this, but when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I really started seeing the same headlines. And I even laughed a few times that the reporters were ripping off my book.
You beat them. You beat them to
Yeah,
the, yeah.
yeah.
Well, congratulations, because it is a wonderful book, and I'm glad you've recorded it all. It really is amazing. You mentioned just a moment ago, moving to Poland. That was a big step, but you've lived in so many places: Sweden and Canada, of course, Poland, and beyond. Wh- How did your identity? I mean, my family are from Holland, although I've never really thought to move there. How did that change your perspective? Because that's a really big step and almost a leap in this.
It's funny because I didn't think of it until as a big leap or a big change until after, because I've always had that streak in me of, okay, I always had this theory that I can pack my house up in 1 or 2 days, probably not anymore, but
Okay. Yeah.
it used to be that way. And then we could just move. And that's how I've sort of lived my life a little bit. Um, but I think what it really did, what I really noticed is that it opened my eyes to the world. And I know that sounds very grand. But what happened when I moved was that I started really, really seeing people thinking differently about the world, different experiences. Um, I live in Toronto and then Vancouver, but in Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. You can walk down the street, 152 different languages a day or something like that. Don't quote me. But in Poland, it was interesting because almost none of my friends just spoke one language. They all spoke 3 or 4 languages. Everybody traveled and traveled extensively. And it's almost like they had this bigger knowledge of the world than I did. And so it was it was really a learning experience to see how they were living in Poland with residual communism in a way, it just sort of in their blood, but how they were experiencing the world. And it was very different than what I think we experience in North America.
Hmm.
We're closed off here.
They do travel so much more.
Hmm.
It's very, I'm aware of that too. I'm not uh, as much of a world traveler, but I've traveled professionally and then personally, and you really do get that sense that we do seem to be more root bound here. Caroline Topperman's our guest today. Fantastic new book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow: One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. Again, I just love that title. Congratulations on the book. So much research, and you mentioned kind of a couple different rewrites, but you've really done some amazing things with this book and uncovered, I think, it's just some incredible family stories, which to me always are the most interesting part. One in particular about your grandmother, I thought was so fascinating. Maybe you'll tell us just briefly about that story of about how she broke some social norms, and I thought that was I love that, and I think it's always wonderful to read family history, especially where women have play such a role. And I wonder, as a woman yourself, what did that mean to you, and how did that change your perspective on your own family?
A lot. And
Long question. Long question. Sorry
no,
about
no, it's all good. And I'm going to ask which grandmother because I think they both did
Okay.
in their own ways. So
In Afghanistan. Your
the
grandma.
my that one, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So I think she was incredible. I think I didn't know her. I met her once for just a few hours. Um, but I think I can't even imagine what she would have thought. I think maybe I have some of that too, because I feel like I would have done some of the things she did and just
Yeah,
not listened when
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
said no.
yeah.
And so, I mean, because yes, she went the first time she went to the market, they threw fruit, rotten fruit at her and rocks, and they wanted to stone her. She was a woman. She wasn't allowed in the market with the men. And the fact that she wound up going and learning Farsi And then my grandfather created that Polish Farsi, Farsi Polish dictionary for the family. And the fact that she was willing to sort of accept society, she wasn't really trying to change it per se. She just integrated herself. Um, and went in and just said, "Yeah, I'm." And then they let her trade in the market, which was amazing. And then the second half of what she did was the fact that she convinced the general of the area to let the girls wear shorts to gym class. And my dad actually remembers that he was young enough that he was allowed to attend those classes, so he remembers all of that firsthand. And I'm actually working on a second book now that delves into that a lot more.
Hmm.
But I can't even imagine what it would have been like for her to suddenly find herself in Afghanistan in a place where she doesn't know the language and the culture for her very foreign to her European upbringing, of course.
Mhm.
And they found themselves unable to return because the war broke out. So yeah, I think it definitely brought me closer to my dad's side of the family,
Mhm.
and also made me think that going forward, I want these women to be proud of me, of what I'm trying to do as well. That's why I think their stories are so important to be told.
I just agree 100%. I think we can learn so much from genealogy and kind of tracing our roots. And in a lot of ways, it really does embolden. My family history is such, not to personalize this too much, but I have a lot of relatives who are in the trades, working with their hands. And as I learned more about them, I felt a little bit more of a sense of confidence in working with my hands myself. Did you have some of that same? Did you feel emboldened as you were working on this book and throughout your life and with additional family members?
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah,
actually, one of the goals of this book was to have people start thinking about their families
yeah.
and doing their own research. So this is great. I love hearing about everybody else's families.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think definitely it made me understand my mother better. It
Yeah.
made me understand both my grandmothers a little bit better, to see what they had gone through as well. Because, I hope I poke fun at myself just enough in there to say that my move to Poland was nowhere near what any of these women had gone through. And
Or-
so it really did give me the confidence also to say, hey, like, if they did it, I can do it. And all of this is possible. All of this is possible, and it's possible to change, and it's possible to grow, and it's possible to discover new things. I don't need to be set in my ways.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor, Acorns, the financial wellness app that makes it easy to invest for your future, save for tomorrow, and spend smarter today. So stay with us. There's more ahead in the second half of our conversation with Caroline Topperman as we dig deeper into family, identity, and the search for home. You know, when I was growing up, we didn't talk much about money. You learned by making mistakes, often expensive ones. I'll tell you, I didn't even think about investing until later in life. It felt complicated, intimidating. Like it just wasn't built for folks like me. But the truth is, it is never too late to start. And that's why I'm really glad to be working with Acorns again. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns. April is Financial Literacy Month. That's right, a whole month dedicated to learning how to take better control of your money. The good news? You don't need all 30 days. Acorns makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change. You don't need a ton of time. You can create your Acorns account and start investing in just 5 minutes. You don't need to feel like financial wellness is impossible. Acorns gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money back on track. Basically, Acorns does the hard part, so you can give your money a chance to grow. You've heard me talk about Acorns before, and for good reason. It's a tool I wish I had earlier in life, but I'm using it now, and I love how easy it's been to feel more in control, even later in the game, like me. You can even invest for your kids and grandkids, too. all in one place. Sign up now and join the over 14 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $25 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/NOB. That's acorns.com/NOB, or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/NOB. Again, our guest is Caroline Topperman, author of this fantastic book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow, One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. And I really love that word belonging because it can come in a lot of ways from a lot of different places. But so much of belonging, I think, starts at home, where we really are surrounded by family. We're surrounded by this idea that we're safe. And you really do this wonderful job of kind of creating this idea that it can be inherited. It can come from previous family members, of course, but then it can also be created. And I wonder, as you retraced your own family's journey, did you feel more rooted in Poland? Do you feel more rooted sometimes when you're in Toronto, or where you are today? What's your kind of perspective on all of that?
I mean, definitely. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed my time in Poland. I'll say that. I really liked living there. And yeah, it definitely it sort of changed my outlook on the world a little bit too. And just it gave me also, I can be judgmental and quick to make decisions about things, but it really did force me to slow down and see that, okay, there are different ways of thinking and approaching things. And um, in Toronto, yes, this is where I grew up. So, of course, my roots are here to a certain extent. But one thing that it did that was very interesting, the more I found out about my family's connections to different cultures. So, for example, Afghan culture, what it actually did is created this bridge where now I'm not really, I'm or not at all part of the Afghan community in Toronto, but I have this soft spot for this community, and I've met a lot of the people, and I work with people, with girls who live in Afghanistan, and teach them writing now. And so it's sort of rooted me into other very unexpected spots where now I feel that even though they're not really my roots, but I have this deeper connection with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, you really tell this wonderful story. It's just lovely, and you weave together, as I said, really at the outset of our kind of conversation today. You really weave together a personal and a historical, and I love that because and you talk a little bit about Ukraine and 2013 Poland, and how did you how did you bring those elements together and kind of balance the personal with the historical accuracy, because you just do such a great job in this storytelling way.
Thank you. It was hard,
Yeah.
but it was very important to me because I find that we have a lot of memoirs where people don't sort of place their families in historical context. And I think it's very important because I think that makes a huge difference. At least from my family, it made a huge difference on their actions. It made a huge difference on their belief systems. And I think it's very important to look at that. Also, I think that we don't get enough of an education of a proper historical education as we should. And so there's so much fracturing even now that's happening, or constantly that's happening, really. And so what I wanted to do is sort of try to almost put this story in, yes, this is my story, but there's the historical context matters, and you need to know why it matters, and then provide just enough facts so that it doesn't become a dry history book, but that people can kind of start to see and understand what was happening and why certain choices were made.
Mm.
Because I think that that just gets forgotten, that in the narrative in that we have today, every day in the newspapers, all of those things are forgotten, and people just don't know. And but they matter. It really does matter. You need to know, at least, I don't think I have this fantastic knowledge about history. And I have a lot of holes myself, but at least I know where they are and I can recognize them so that when there's something happens in the world, then I can do a little bit of the work to understand why something might be happening.
Yeah, because I think that it does play a role in our lives today, and I think it's really, a famous person said it takes a village, and I love that response, and I think as we raise children, as we parent in lots of different ways, it can really play a role in kind of helping bring up children because they understand this historical perspective, and it's so many of our audience, their lives have been shaped by these kinds of events, by war, by displacement. My own family immigrated Dutch Jews to escape the Nazis, and did so in a way that left family behind, and they started anew. And that's a fascinating story in our family. But we had to kind of go back a few years to kind of start and understand where that family history kind of took place. What advice do you give to those in our audience that maybe they don't quite know where to start? They might have a little bit of record of what their genealogy is, but give us some tips and a little bit of guidance about where we might begin.
So I would say the way I started was to start talking to family members.
Mhm.
There's a trick to that though, because family often sits down and says, "Oh, I don't know, my story is not interesting. Why do you want to know that?" And
Mhm.
so I would just make it a very casual conversation. We all have recorders on our phones. I just quietly turn my phone on and just let what happened happen and pick bits and pieces from conversation. But I will say that the whole field of genealogy is quite robust in Europe because there are a lot of people looking. Not more than once, we would be sitting in a cafe, our local cafe on the main street in Warsaw, and we would have people come up to us who could hear us speaking English, usually from the States, saying, "Hey, we just came to Poland. We're looking for family. Do you know where we can go look for family?"
Wow.
And it was the most bizarre thing, but people just show up and ask us because apparently we were the keepers of all this. But the I would actually start on the ground, and you can do this. You don't have to leave your home to do this because the all the genealogists that are in Europe, in Poland, I'll speak to them especially.
Mhm.
Their English is just fine. They speak English, all of it. It's a fraction of the price of starting here. And so what I did is I actually just sat, especially for the Jewish side of my family, the Polish side
Mhm.
was a lot easier. Though that's online. I can go quite
More
far.
records. Yeah.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
Jewish records were mostly lost. I'm still looking,
Yeah.
but what I did is there are robust sites that where you can start just to look for information. If it is to do with the war, then the Holocaust Museum actually has quite robust information as well. Although I'm still waiting to hear back from them, so it takes a long time. But what I did is I started looking up genealogists in Poland, and it was a fraction of the price, and they spoke to me, and within a month or two I had a dozen or more pages about information that they found. It was leads and everything. It feels very daunting, but it's not actually as hard as it is. You just have to sort of emotionally prepare yourself that you may not find anything, or you may not like what you find.
That's that's true too. Um, I think one of the most amazing things about the book was your discovery of your grandfather's book that's been now held at the Holocaust Museum here in Washington, D.C., as well as the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. My goodness, what a find that was for you. What what was your reaction, and then how did you kind of approach that book in terms of helping guide you in all of this?
So that book's been around for a long time. I just didn't
Yeah,
know about it.
yeah.
And quite a thick volume, and it's all hand typed. So with the mistakes, I don't even know how long it took the man to write that, but it took me a long time for my Polish to be good enough to read it. because it is dry and there's some slang. And even now there are places where I just don't really understand 100% what he was talking about. But um,
At least
I,
it was typed.
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah. I have those letters too.
handwriting. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. But what I did, so then I just sat down, pure and simple, and I Googled his name to see what would come up. And that's how I found that someone had sent it to one of the institutions, and they all share information.
yeah.
And so then I just thought, well, I'm going to email them. So I did, to find out how they got it. And actually, I spoke with the main curator at the Hoover Institute, and she has no idea how they got it. But I know she now has it in her private collection. She has a copy of it. So
Wow.
because it is quite the document. And I reading it was so fascinating. It really showed me. It really sort of opened me up to my grandfather, because I knew him as a grandfather, but he died when I was in my early teens, so I didn't know him as an adult. So there was so much I was able to learn about him. And the book is dry. He's an engineer, and it was written like it's a chronicle of events for real. There,
Timeline.
yeah, there aren't, this isn't very fun and airy reading, but it really showed me, like, I could really read between the lines too, to
Yeah.
see what he really cared about, what he spent more time on, less time on, how he protected family members. And it just gave me that insight as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me a lot about history, because there's a part of it is really his account of fleeing the Nazis. Like there's a section, it's in my book that I took it from his book, but it's like a day by day almost of fleeing the Nazis, where he was a day or two ahead of them.
Wow.
So that was incredible, because those are stories you don't read very often. There are a lot of stories coming out now of like the third gen kids like me, but the that flight east that my grandparents did, that's not as common. So I thought that I learned a lot reading that.
Yeah, it's almost as if I find sometimes in reading about my own family, I try to put myself in that place. You talk about just staying a day or two ahead of the Nazi. What a stressful, incredibly difficult time.
Oh yeah, I can't even imagine what he went through. And then the fact that my grandparents happened to miraculously meet on the street after getting separated. That's just it's great. Like, I would never believe it if I read it in a story. I'd say it was fiction.
Right, right. Well, it's a wonderful book. Of course, our guest is Caroline Topperman, author of this fantastic book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow: One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. You have this great background. You're an entrepreneur, you're a world traveler, and you're a dancer. And I love that. My wife owns a ballet studio here where we live, and she's a dancer. And all of this, I thought, just brings together a real person. How do some of those things, those parts of you, influence your search and influence how you were guided in this family search and your belonging?
Well, the dance definitely gives you really, really good structure to
Yeah,
do things,
yeah,
right? And I think also just the idea that all the jobs and things I've done, it taught me how to talk to people and how to listen to people. So those are just those fundamental things that I was able to take and do from that. But it also gave me that idea of curiosity, to be able to just dive in. And I think really it gave me that I can just close my eyes, dive in, jump into a project, not overthink it, start working on it and figure out my way through it. But it also came in handy in Poland, because when we moved there and we were looking for jobs, since we didn't have anything planned, I wound up finding a dance studio and working at a dance studio at
Yes.
so all of those things just sort of came with me when I was in Poland.
I want to get back to this word belonging because it again just jumps out so much to me. And we hear sometimes about cultural belonging. And so much of the discussion today, politically, and you kind of referenced this, it's hard to separate the two. But So much of the conversation can be polarizing, and identity really has kind of a buzzword to it. But your book, I think, really does this wonderful job. And I wonder if you'll tell us a little bit about your intentions behind how we can have these conversations and still not worry about them being so disruptive to our lives and polarizing.
Yeah, I mean that's tough. And I
That's
think
tough.
sorry. Um I think
Excuse me.
oh,
Sorry.
me too. I think that so because my family have had these experiences and I saw how they survived these experiences, not necessarily survived in a bad way, just made it through these experiences. And then even my parents, because I'm a first generation immigrant to Canada, I saw my parents, how they made it through finding jobs and establishing themselves here and finding their place here. And then my experience of going to Poland, which very different, but I still had to find my place. What it did is it forced me, and this is what I think we all need to a certain extent, is it forced me to sort of slow down, stop jumping in with my ideas and listening first,
Hmm.
because I think that's how we make those bridges with each other. I was at a big fundraiser for the Afghan community recently, and I remember sitting there and they were asking me questions because, of course, I stood out. I looked like I did not belong there at all. But I started telling them about my family, and I could reference little things. I don't know a lot about Afghanistan, but I could tell them where my family lived in Kabul. I could talk about the road building and some of the customs that my dad told me about. And right away, we had an instant connection. And these people were telling me that they were honored to be sitting at a table with me. And I was sitting there thinking they were insane because I was honored to be sitting at a table with them. And it didn't take much for us to find a bond.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what's missing right now. And I cannot stress that enough. I'm speaking, it's very light, but I think we're coming with these very small ideas, and we're just throwing ourselves first. And I think it's really important that we all stop and think for a second and just listen to somebody else's experience and put some value in that too. And I think that's the way that that's the way to find our belonging, because you don't know where it's going to come from. You just don't know. Sometimes the people you think will accept you won't. I know that sounds a little vague, but I really think that's what it was. It was like the minute I stopped in Poland and just sort of went with the flow and let them and didn't fight, didn't have that urge to fight. That's the minute things got easier for me.
Thank you. Caroline Topperman's been our guest today. This has just been so much fun. Yeah, so selfishly, I'd love to have you back, talk about the next book. But this book is so fantastic. I just can't recommend it enough. Your Roots Cast a Shadow, One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. Caroline Topperman, congrats on the book. My best to you. Such an interesting topic, and we appreciate your time and all of your insights. It's been inspirational to talk to you. You've really done some amazing things. And so please come back and talk to us again. I know everybody's going to just love it.
Thank you so much. This has been a really fun conversation. Very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My thanks to Acorns for sponsoring today's episode. Acorns. Acorns makes it easy for everyone to start saving and investing. My thanks to our guest today, Caroline Topperman, who has written the amazing book, Your Roots Cast a Shadow, One Family's Search Across History for Belonging. My thanks, of course, go to the Henniger team for keeping us on track. My thanks always go to you, our audience here on radio and podcast. Please be well, be safe. Let's talk about better, the Not Old Better show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.